Melanie moved quietly through their Chicago home, straightening every detail as she always did. At 34, she had built what many called the perfect house. Christopher sat at the breakfast table, absorbed in his phone, just as he had been for months. "Good morning, babe. Did you sleep well?" she asked, pouring his coffee, strong, no sugar, with a hint of cinnamon. He looked up briefly, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes. I've got an important meeting today, so I'll be leaving early, babe," he said. She nodded, used to his packed schedule. Christopher was a successful attorney, and she had always admired his dedication. At least, she wanted to believe she did. She stepped into the room that should have been the baby's. 3 months had passed since the loss, but the ache still felt raw. She touched the unused crib, tears pricking her eyes. "Mel, you have to let that go," Christopher said from the doorway, his tone sharp. "It's not healthy. Maybe you should see someone." The coldness stunned her. "It's still hard, Chris. We lost our child." "That's not going to bring him back," he said, adjusting his tie. "I'm leaving. Don't wait for me for dinner. The meeting might run late." His kiss on her forehead was mechanical. She watched him go, a strange heaviness settling in her chest. In the days that followed, little things began to gnaw at her. Late nights with flimsy excuses, phone calls taken in other rooms, a laptop snapped shut the moment she entered the study, papers hidden as if nothing were wrong. "Are you okay? You seem distant," she asked one quiet evening at dinner. "Just tired. Things at the firm are complicated right now, babe," he replied, avoiding her eyes. When she suggested a weekend trip, he claimed he couldn't travel. The conversation died, just like it always did. She pretended to read in bed while watching him type on his phone with an urgency he never showed when messaging her. A week later, during lunch with her best friend Catherine, 40, sharp and observant, Melanie finally voiced the unease that had been gnawing at her. Catherine took her hand and cautiously suggested that Christopher might be seeing someone else. Melanie rejected the idea at first, but then asked Catherine to stay alert. That night, she watched him differently. How he guarded his phone, avoided eye contact, no longer reached for her hand as they fell asleep. A seed of suspicion had taken root. Then came the rainy Thursday that shattered everything. Around 2 in the morning, she heard low murmurs from the study. Christopher wasn't in bed. Barefoot, she crossed the cold floor and found the study door slightly ajar, a thin line of light slipping through. "Are you sure this is going to work?" a soft, malicious female voice asked. "Lorraine, we've talked about it 100 times. The plan is perfect," Christopher replied, low and clear. After the loss, everyone would assume she'd lost her mind. No one would question it. Melanie felt her blood run cold. They spoke of Dr. Richard Mason signing reports declaring her a danger to herself and others due to her depression, of convincing any judge it was urgent. They planned to use the event at her mother's house on Friday, slip a sedative into her chamomile tea so she would appear incoherent in front of witnesses. With enough testimony, no one would argue she needed immediate help. "If she resists, she won't be able to stop us," Lorraine said. Christopher's voice was indifferent. "She trusts me. Always has." Then he admitted to Melanie's horror, "I can only touch her thinking of you, Mel." 2 years. The words cut her like knives. Melanie pressed herself against the wall, trembling, and ran to their bedroom. She slipped under the covers and pretended to sleep. When Christopher climbed in minutes later, she forced herself not to move away. The man beside her was no longer her husband. He was her executioner. The hours crawled as she replayed every word she had overheard. Christopher wasn't just betraying her. He and Lorraine were plotting to strip her of freedom, property, and dignity, making the world see her as unstable. When the first ray of sunlight entered the window, something inside Melanie shifted. The trusting woman who had gone to bed the night before was gone. In her place stood someone refusing to be destroyed without a fight. Christopher woke as usual, gave her a mechanical kiss on the forehead, and went to shower. Melanie rose and looked in the mirror. For the first time in months, her eyes reflected not pain, but determination. "Good morning, babe," she said sweetly when Christopher emerged. "Did you sleep well?" "As always, Mel," he answered, unaware she already knew every detail of his sinister plan. While making coffee, she smiled. Christopher thought she was weak, but he had underestimated her. That day, every smile, every "yes, my babe," was a move on her chessboard. She would no longer be a pawn. She would be the queen. As soon as he left for work, Melanie dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "Edward, it's me. I need to see you." "It's urgent." Edward Vaughn, her old college friend and now a tech and security expert, met her at a quiet downtown cafe. At 36, with sharp eyes behind glasses, he immediately noticed the change in her. She told him everything she had overheard. His face darkened. "This is monstrous." "I know. That's why I need your help. I want them to pay, but I need proof." "What are you thinking?" "Cameras. I want to record everything. When they make their move, the world will see who they really are." Edward agreed. "I can set up a discreet system in your house. Tiny cameras with audio, all connected to a secure server only we can access." Within 2 hours, his trusted technician, disguised as an internet worker, had installed devices in the study, living room, kitchen, and bedroom. "You can watch live and recordings will save automatically," the technician explained. Later, Melanie called Edward. "Everything's set. But what about the event at my mother's on Friday?" "I'll be there as your distant cousin," he said with a grin. "And I'll bring a portable projector. At your signal, I'll show the recordings for everyone." A chill of satisfaction ran down her spine. In the following days, she played the perfect wife, smiling, affectionate, even talking about the future. Christopher believed she was recovering, which only made his deception easier. One night, he caressed her hair. "I'm proud of you, Mel." She kissed his hand. "It's because of your support, Chris." Inside, she fought the urge to laugh at the irony. On Thursday night, Melanie watched him on her phone app as he spoke in the study. "Everything ready for tomorrow, Lorraine? Dr. Mason will be on duty. Once she shows symptoms in front of everyone, I'll take her straight to the hospital. The reports are signed. Acute psychotic break. Imminent risk. With the witnesses, no one will challenge it. I can't wait to get rid of her. Soon we'll be free and rich." Melanie closed the app and stared at her reflection. She was no longer the woman of a week ago. She was sharper, stronger, and more dangerous. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "they'll see who they're dealing with." Friday dawned bright and clear. Melanie woke early, calm but alert. Christopher gave her the same false kiss and asked if she was ready for her mother's event. "Of course," she said sweetly, handing him his coffee. She noticed him avoid her gaze as he checked his phone. Later, through the cameras, she watched him pull a small vial from his study, dissolve its contents in water, and slip it into his jacket pocket with a satisfied smile. At 5 o'clock, Edward arrived, introduced as a cousin just passing through Chicago. Christopher shook his hand warmly. "Melanie has told me a lot about you," he said. Edward smiled, carrying only a small backpack. "I hope you don't mind if I brought my camera. I love capturing family moments." "Of course, make yourself at home," Christopher replied. The event at Mrs. Morgan's elegant home was in full swing. About 40 guests had gathered. Family, close friends, longtime acquaintances. Mrs. Morgan, 65, with her silver hair perfectly styled, embraced her daughter warmly. "You look radiant. So much better than these past months," she said. "I've been feeling well, Mom." "Chris has been so supportive," Melanie replied. Christopher smiled modestly, playing the devoted husband. "She's a fighter." "I'm very proud of my wife," he added, his tone calculated. The first 2 hours passed without incident. Melanie moved gracefully among the guests, laughing, hugging relatives she hadn't seen in months. On the surface, she was the perfect hostess, but inside, every muscle was taut with tension. Edward had positioned himself strategically near the projector the family often used for photos, discreetly connecting his equipment to the home's audio and video system. At 8:30, Christopher approached with a cup of tea. "I brought your herbal tea, babe. I know you always have one around this time." "How thoughtful of you," Melanie said, recognizing the familiar chamomile scent, but noticing a faint bitterness that didn't belong. She lifted the cup, pretending to sip, but only moistened her lips. The moment Christopher turned to greet another guest, she discreetly poured the tea into a planter beside the armchair. 15 minutes later, she took a small dose of syrup hidden in her purse. Within moments, the effects began. She rose abruptly, clutching her mouth. "Oh God, I feel strange," she gasped. Christopher rushed to her side, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. "What's wrong, babe? You look pale." "I don't know, everything's spinning." She staggered dramatically, gripping the back of a chair. Concern rippled through the room as guests turned toward her. "Melanie, are you all right?" her mother cried, hurrying over. "I can't." The voices. Melanie muttered incoherently, her eyes darting to empty corners as though she were hearing things no one else could. "They're saying horrible things." Worried whispers spread through the crowd. Christopher held her protectively, making sure everyone saw his supposed devotion. "It's okay, babe, I'm here." "No. You don't understand." Melanie shouted, her voice rising. "They want to hurt me. All of you want to hurt me." "Please calm down," Christopher urged, his tone thick with feigned concern. "I'm sorry, everyone. She hasn't been herself since we lost the baby. Maybe we should call a doctor," one guest suggested. "No," Melanie cried, collapsing to the floor in a trembling fit. "Don't let them take me." Her mother knelt beside her, distraught. "My life is yours, Melanie. Please don't do this." At that moment, Edward caught Melanie's eye and gave a subtle signal. She straightened, her voice suddenly clear and commanding. "Chris, did you really think I was that stupid?" The sudden shift silenced the room. Christopher frowned, confused. "What are you talking about, Melanie?" "I'm talking about the sedative you slipped into my tea. About your plan to have me committed. About your lover, Lorraine, and Dr. Richard Mason." His face went pale. "You're delirious." "Really?" Melanie stood, her fragile act gone. "Edward, play it." The projector flickered on, filling the wall with images of Christopher in his study, pouring sedative into a glass of water. His voice came through the speakers, clear and unmistakable. "Friday during the event at her mother's house, I'll slip the sedative into the drink she always takes." Gasps rippled through the room. All eyes turned to Christopher, frozen in shock as his betrayal played out before 40 witnesses. This isn't real," he stammered, hands trembling. "Someone manipulated those videos. Melanie's having an episode. You can't believe her." "Shut up," Melanie snapped. Her transformation was striking, no longer fragile, but cold, steady, and unrelenting. "You haven't seen anything yet." Edward played the next clip, a recorded phone call between Christopher and Lorraine. Their voices filled the room. "With her committed, I'll control everything. Her father's inheritance, the properties, the investments. It'll all be ours." Mrs. Morgan clutched her chest, tears of rage in her eyes. "My God, how could you? And when I file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and mental instability, she won't get a cent," Christopher boasted. The crowd erupted in outrage. Guests stepped back in disgust. Then came the words that twisted every stomach. "Melanie is pathetic. I can only touch her thinking of you." A collective shiver ran through the room. Women grimaced. Men shook their heads in open disdain. "Enough," Christopher shouted, lunging toward the projector. "This is a setup. She's sick." "The only sick one here is you," Melanie said, blocking his path. "Edward, show them the messages." The screen lit up with WhatsApp chats between Christopher, Lorraine, and a contact saved as Dr. M. "Dr. M, reports are ready. Acute psychotic break with self-destructive tendencies. With witnesses, impossible to dispute. Christopher, perfect. How much?" "Dr. M, $50,000. Half now, half once she's committed." "Lorraine, worth every penny to get rid of her." The room erupted again. Guests snapped photos and recorded videos, capturing every incriminating detail. "They planned to drug me, lock me away, and steal everything that belonged to me," Melanie declared, her voice ringing with authority. "But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. This is all fake." Christopher tried, desperation creeping in. "She lost the baby and had a breakdown. She's not well." Melanie let out a chilling laugh. "You're right, Chris. I wasn't well. I was blind. Blind with love for a man unworthy even of my contempt." Turning to the guests, she held herself tall, radiating dignity. "I'm sorry you had to witness this, but it was necessary for you to see the man I once called my husband." Her mother, eyes brimming with tears and pride, whispered, "My brave daughter, how did you uncover all this?" "Last Thursday, I overheard a conversation in his study," Melanie explained, never breaking her gaze from Christopher. "From that moment, I gathered proof. You said I trusted you blindly, Chris, and you were right. But that trust died the moment I learned your plans." Christopher tried one last approach, but two of her cousins blocked his path. "Melanie, please, we can talk alone." "I can explain." "Explain what?" she shot back. "How you plan to drug me? To have me committed? To steal my inheritance? Or how you've been sleeping with Lorraine for 2 years?" "Where is Lorraine now?" one guest demanded. Melanie's cold smile returned. "Excellent question. Edward, call the police. I'm sure they'll be interested in all of this." "I already did," Edward said, holding up his phone. "They're on their way." As if on cue, sirens wailed outside. Christopher's face turned ashen. "You can't do this. I'm an attorney. I know my rights." "And I know mine," Melanie said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Including the right not to be drugged and committed by my own husband." The front door opened, and 3 officers stepped inside, led by a middle-aged commander. "Good evening. We received a report of conspiracy. Who is the victim?" "I am," Melanie said, stepping forward. "And here is all the evidence you need." While Edward transferred the files onto a flash drive, Melanie watched Christopher being handcuffed. The man she had once loved above all else now looked small and pathetic, his desperate pleas ignored. "Mel, please, you can't do this. We're married." She approached him one last time, her voice low but firm enough for everyone to hear. "Chris, you called me pathetic, said I lived in a fantasy. You were right, but that fantasy is over. Now you'll learn what happens when you cross the wrong woman." As the police led Christopher away, Melanie stood tall in the center of the room, surrounded by family and friends staring at her with. The fragile woman they thought they knew was gone. A stronger version had taken her place, and this was only the beginning. 3 weeks later, the case that had shaken Chicago reached the courtroom. Melanie sat in the front row, eyes fixed on Christopher at the defendant's table. He looked years older, stripped of his tailored suits, now in prison orange, avoiding her gaze. "The prosecution has presented irrefutable evidence," the judge declared, his voice echoing in the packed courtroom. "Audio and video recordings, text messages, falsified medical reports, and testimony from 40 witnesses." Beside Christopher sat Lorraine, once smug at the thought of destroying a family, now reduced to silent tears. She had been arrested in the apartment she shared with Christopher, alongside Dr. Richard Mason and a suitcase of cash, payment for the scheme. "Christopher Johnson," the judge continued, "you are guilty of attempted defamation, document falsification, criminal conspiracy, and attempted fraud. Lorraine Stevens is guilty of complicity in all charges." Melanie felt her mother squeeze her hand, a silent show of unwavering support through the ordeal. "Dr. Richard Mason," the judge said, turning to the third accused, "you are guilty of conspiracy, falsifying medical reports, and practicing medicine illegally." At 50, his career was over, his reputation in ruins. "Considering the severity of the crimes and their psychological impact on the victim, I sentence Christopher Johnson to 22 years in prison. Lorraine Stevens, 20 years. Dr. Richard Mason, 18 years. A murmur of approval filled the courtroom. Melanie closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Justice had finally been served. Christopher turned toward her one last time. "Melanie." "No," she cut him off, standing tall. "You had your chance. Now it's my turn to live." 6 months later, Melanie was a different woman. Her hair was cut short in a sleek, modern style, her wardrobe bold and confident. Most importantly, the light had returned to her eyes. "How does it feel to own your own business?" asked Catherine, her best friend, as they lunched at the restaurant Melanie had opened with part of the inheritance Christopher had tried to steal. "Free," Melanie answered with a genuine smile. "For the first time, I control my own future." Her restaurant, Aurora Bistro, had become a success, a gathering place for women who had endured hardship and emerged stronger. "And Edward?" Catherine teased, grinning. Melanie blushed. "We're just friends. For now, Catherine laughed. But the way he looks at you. Please, Melanie said, shaking her head. I'm still finding myself. I won't rush it. Edward remained a steady presence, patient and respectful, knowing she needed time to heal. One afternoon, as she sorted finalized divorce papers, Melanie received an unexpected letter from a woman named Sarah, who had seen her interview on TV. Dear Melanie, the letter read, Your bravery inspired me to denounce my husband, who also planned to have me committed to take my children. Thanks to you, I gathered evidence, and now I am free. You saved my life without even knowing it. Tears streamed down Melanie's face. She had never imagined her story would empower others. Soon, dozens of letters arrived from women who found the courage to fight back because of her. A year after the trial, Melanie sat in her office when Edward appeared at the door, carrying a bouquet of flowers. What's this? She asked, smiling. To celebrate. Today marks exactly 1 year since your freedom. She glanced at the calendar, surprised. You're right. Incredible. And I wanted to give you something, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Edward, I told you. No engagement ring, she laughed. Open it. Inside was a delicate phoenix pendant. For the woman who rose from the ashes, he said softly. Melanie's eyes filled with tears. It's beautiful. Like you. She let him fasten it around her neck, sensing for the first time in years that she might be ready to open her heart again. That night, in her new home, bought with her own earnings, she looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was strong, independent, whole. Her scars told a story of survival and triumph. Touching the phoenix pendant, she smiled. Christopher had tried to destroy her, but instead, he had awakened a strength she never knew she had. He wanted a weak, submissive wife. He had created a warrior. Life had taught her that not everyone is who they seem, that true love does not manipulate or control, and that the best revenge is to live well and be happy. She turned off the lights, ready for tomorrow, ready for the life that was finally hers. You just heard this one from Stories by Sue. If it resonated, don't forget to like and subscribe. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching.